Hello, my name is Richie Richie. Welcome to the Wild West podcast. You can go ahead and check out my content as well as my fellow colleagues' content over on the MHRT network. Over that away is the real Alex Gibbons, who was unable to join us for the show last week while Jack and I held down the fort. But we have a great show planned for you today. And by the way, anything you want to catch for Alex, there's going to be 2 spots. Actually 3 spots. 1 here. That's the most important. 2 is you can catch his stuff over on Airhead Attic, where he writes some columns for them. Some great Chiefs content. To be quite honest, I think his columns are probably the best written of anyone there. So go ahead and check his stuff out. And in addition to that, you can catch Alex, which is, this season's quickly approaching here. You can catch him on the Lightning Fast Fantasy Podcast with the real Alex Gibbons and Coach Defense over on the Lockdown Defense YouTube's channel. Down directly below here is Roberto. No, just Robert. Just kidding. It is a Robert, our resident Chargers fan. Tons of knowledge to kind of give us on the Chargers. Some really, really interesting stuff there. And unfortunately, Jack was unable to join us on the show tonight. Apparently, he is not feeling his best. Jack, I always find alcohol kills anything. So you have the 4th of July coming up tomorrow. My suggestion is 1 to 2 bottles of something. And you'll be good in like 2 days. You'll be good in like 2 days. But anyhow,
for how long? How long are you gonna be good for after that?
For maybe 24 hours.
Just get hydrated afterwards, and then
you're gonna feel like
your ailments
for 5
go away.
days.
Yeah. All of your ailments go away. Anyways, guys, we're gonna jump into a really interesting show. Today's show is not just an update show. We are going to give 5, maybe with a couple extras, depending on which team you're with, roster bubble players for each of our teams. I think that'll be an interesting show. As we've just finished kind of OTAs and some of these other kind of shared mandatory team activities and whatnot, I think you're starting to hear rumblings of, this player's not looking good, or this player, may not be up to par, or moreover, you're getting information that a player who you drafted or even undrafted, who you brought in as an undrafted free agent, is starting to pop a little bit. And that can really change the composition of your roster. As a Denver Broncos fan, we have had a storied and frankly incredibly successful history of undrafted free agents, which are certainly players that you don't expect to make the 53-man roster, but when they do, that is a value player, and if they can even get to a starter caliber position, man, that is just an absolute bargain for your team. So I think without any further ado, Alex, I'm going to throw over to you, talk about your Kansas City Chiefs. Before you jump into your roster bubble players, I'm not going to say negative news about players themselves, but I do think there needs to be some comments made about the recent 2 players on your team who have had their cars stolen within the last week.
What is this? This is news to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
So,
Like what?
So, the let's talk Chiefs guy. He and I are kind of, he posts a lot of stuff, so we follow each other and all that good things. He had a recent stream just earlier today or yesterday where one of the Chiefs players reached out to him indicating that he had his car stolen right from his driveway. He had 2 vehicles. One vehicle was broken into and items were stolen from it. And then the other vehicle, even though it was locked, was unlocked and stolen physically from his driveway. which is kind of frightening when you kind of hear that kind of stuff. Kind of show you that no matter who you are, stuff like that can happen to you as well. So I think that's a pretty important thing to keep in mind. And then late last week, or was it late last week or mid last week, kind of maybe right around the time of our show, the Chiefs, I think, had another player on the other side. So like there's the Kansas City side and the Mississippi side sort of thing.
The Kansas side, yeah.
Yeah. Apparently one guy was on one side and the other guy was on the other. So apparently in that area, it just doesn't matter. Your car is not safe. And so that was
and I'd be curious where they live, because I'm sure there's there's a bunch of nice apartment complexes like right in the heart of downtown, which is also not the best area. and I know like Kelsey used to live in one. I think Mahomes did too. So like I wouldn't be shocked if they were in something like that, which people will get into the parking garage and just kind of see what they can get into. So it's it happens everywhere, and unfortunately happens a lot in KC.
Yeah. So and that's two vehicles that were just outright stolen.
That's crazy.
Which I mean,
you got
blows my
insurance.
mind. Blows my mind. I mean, and the fact that they're NFL players too. Like, what are the odds that you got two? You only have like 90 guys that are basically on your roster right now, right? Yeah. So out of the entire city, in like a 1.5 week period max, you've got two of your 90 men that are on your roster. And my understanding is that these guys are 53-man roster guys too.
Yeah.
So again,
that's who it is.
That further narrows it down, which is just, insane. Out of everyone there, you got two of your players that have had their cars physically stolen, which is crazy.
Oh, Xavier Worth. Okay, yeah, I remember seeing about that. Yeah, it wasn't a parking garage, so it was Worthy.
And then there's another guy that just got released today.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about now.
Yeah. So, anyways, I just thought it was so odd in terms of the news that I just thought, bring it up. But for nothing else, for our listeners who are joining us today, make sure you lock your car. If you have some deterrent that you can add to your vehicle, like some kind of a steering wheel lock to indicate to somebody that, there's some additional precautions that have been taken in that particular vehicle. Thieves will obviously prioritize the easy target rather than the more difficult one. So stay safe out there. And with that in mind,
the only explanation is it's an inside job. Someone's targeting Chiefs players. Who? We're going to get to the bottom of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Alex, I'm going to throw over to you to kind of bring up some kind of Chiefs roster bubble players. I think part of this would be a good idea to start bringing up guys that, maybe many might not think are on the roster bubble. And I think that might be an important thing.
Yeah. One little piece of news I did want to go over before I get into that, just because I think it happened, though, sometime last week. I don't remember when, but Chiefs did eventually go ahead and move forward with releasing Isaiah Buggs, who was the defensive tackle that just couldn't stay out of the headlines or the police station. So, as I think I said a few times, I anticipated that he would be released, just kind of given his status and what he signed to come in. And Chiefs were ready, I think, to let the due diligence play itself out, and we're ready to move on. So glad that he's can no longer kind of tarnish the Chiefs' name by having other issues come up, and hope that he can kind of figure his life out and maybe get a chance with another team. But certainly I'd say burned his bridge in KC.
Did you happen to see the update that came out last week? I think we did announce part of it on the show, just with regards to the dog situation, which obviously is going to pull at many people's heartstrings just because of, most people's affinity for animals.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you can hear my dogs.
Your dogs are understanding what's going on.
They know what we're talking about. They're like, we got to support.
Yeah, like we got the posse here. We support the dogs.
It ain't right.
But with regards to Buggs, apparently this is the news that kind of came out from the, I guess between our shows, not last week, but like between the week prior and last week's show, which was some interesting news came out through Bugs' attorney, whereby the dogs were not his, apparently.
Oh, yeah. He didn't know they were there.
And he didn't even know they were there.
Allegedly.
Like apparently they were his buddy's dogs or something like that. And he wasn't even in town. He was unaware the dogs were even at his house.
Wow.
Well, I mean, if that
comes
out to be true, then that's unfortunate.
If it can be proven, then, I think that it comes down to a character issue at this point, right?
Well, then you also still have the looming arrest warrant for dragging his baby mama down some stairs and domestic violence, which is, pretty much a zero tolerance thing. So, even if the dog thing does come out to be kind of a negligent, chain of events of him just not knowing that someone left dogs there and basically starved him to die, that's fine, but still did the other thing after already being in trouble for the dog thing. So,
it's kind of tough to,
like I said, I'd be shocked he gets another chance just with that. That tag alone, but maybe it doesn't get to the point of charges and, he can have another shot, but I don't know. From what I initially read, doesn't seem to be a very good situation for anyone involved.
No, I agree. So getting into the roster bubble players for your Kansas City Chiefs, obviously Bugs was probably one of them.
Yeah, he was certainly, I don't even know. He was probably, I think they signed him to a futures deal. So I think that kind of tells you they don't even have faith when they're bringing him in that they're going to make it to the 53. I think it was just young depth that came from, a good program in Alabama, and Beach has always kind of had an affinity for first round, buzz outs of other teams are like guys that come from, your Alabamas or Clemsons or, things like that. So, he certainly was on the bubble, but definitely out of consideration now. I think that, in my opinion, probably the most interesting position group that's somewhat logjammed right now, and there definitely will be some bubble guys, and it'll be intriguing to watch who becomes the bubble players. But that's in the wide receiver room, just because they pretty much brought everyone back from last year outside of MVS, and then add two receivers that are kind of a similar skill set to MVS and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. So, that I think they're looking at a total right now of 13 receivers. So on the roster, that's you're definitely going to trim that up, and someone's going to end up being the odd man out. That was, that was a significant contributor in years past and even last year. And I think, to me, the three that kind of their name carries some weight, but I think definitely could end up being a bubble player or someone that the Chiefs just trade, are, Kadarius Toney, Hardman, and Justin Watson. Mainly, those are all three guys. I guess Hardman and Watson more than Toney are two guys that, yeah, Jack, it's a little ridiculous, but I guess when you got Mahomes and you kind of run a pass-heavy offense, you might as well load up in the offseason. But 13 is a pretty large amount. But yeah, I think between Toney and Hardman, or Watson and Hardman, those two guys have certainly come up big time in points of the season last year. Hardman caught the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Toney has the skill set, but is made of paper mache and also seems to be a little bit of a head case. But you hope, maybe he can bounce back after, kind of the poor year he had last year. But those three are definitely, I think it's going to be a fight for which one of them gets a spot, because you kind of game of numbers, they added two receivers this offseason. one, via free agency, one first round of the draft, and only lost one from last year. So someone's got to be the odd man out. And it's going to be someone that, definitely was a contributor in years past, which I think you kind of need that if you want to, keep sustained success while also retooling your roster. So it'll be exciting to watch that one fold out. And then sticking on the offensive side, same with the running back room. I think that's an intriguing position group that can kind of bring you. There's going to be a player or two that are on the bubble. I think your only locks, and it pains me to say one of them is Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And that's not to say maybe there's a late signing somewhere, and, and that kind of creates a issue because I don't think they're fully have faith in Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Obviously, they let him walk. didn't take his 5th-year option, let him walk, and then brought him back on to player minimum. After no one else wanted him. But that does leave the room for 2 other spots, and you're looking at you got Luis Reese Zamit, the rugby guy. Deneric Prince was an undrafted running back last year out of Tulsa. That if you go watch his highlight tape, you're like, yeah, that guy needs to be in an NFL room. And he was on the practice squad last year. Keontae Ingram, and then they signed 2 other undrafted guys. So I think ultimately, I'm kind of convinced that Zemit or Zemet, however you say it, I think he's going to make the roster. Just with the change in the special teams rules, kind of the versatility. You can at least see when you watch his rugby highlights, even if I don't really understand what I'm watching, but you can tell he's an athlete. And they gave him a pretty good amount of money and didn't give him a international player designation. So that kind of tells me they are planning to use him, whether that's like a, Swiss Army knife on special teams, and maybe he can develop enough to get into the offense or not. I think that kind of tells you he's in, and that sort of leaves, competition, I think, between Deneric Prince and Keontae Ingram, which, we'll see. Prince kind of turned some heads last year. He obviously, did enough to stay around for the practice squad and then to bring him back again. And you've kind of heard rumblings through the early part of OTAs that he's kind of, continuing on to the same. So hopefully, as we get into the preseason, he gets the opportunities and can kind of show out in actual game scenarios. And, I think he would be the one, but he's certainly on the bubble right now as things stand. And that's, looking at the offensive side of the ball. And then, defensively, I think really there's not a whole lot of bubble players. Just with kind of how the roster was constructed and what they added this offseason, essentially just brought everyone back, outside of, a few late round picks, but they, one was to replace Snead, and then, added some depth at linebacker. But yeah, I think really the only guy that could end up being on the bubble is Derek Nandi. And that's just me kind of talking out of, they brought in some younger D tackles last year. They've had some younger guys in the building that haven't really carved out a role yet. And also traded for Neil Farrell last year. And I know Neil Farrell is, very much, one trick pony and a run stopping, just Coke machine with legs. But that's pretty much what Derek Nandi is too. And, they re-signed him back, but at the same time, they also let him go test free agency. So that kind of tells me, if one of these younger guys or one of these depth pieces we've had sticking around, can take that next step, they probably be fine to kind of go down in age a little bit in the D tackle room and, let Nandi walk and free up some cap space to make a move, down the road if something happens. But yeah, that's pretty much, I tried to look at it from who are sort of like some bigger name guys or bigger contributors in years past that I think could end up finding themselves, in a position of being traded somewhere or, ultimately cut. But yeah, see, Jack. I knew Jack would know. Former Raider Farrell. But yeah, that's what Derek Nandi is, and that's all. I mean, Derek Nandi is very obviously gets taken off the field in third down, passing down situations. They're like, so I mean, for them to, I think the veteran minimum is what they gave him. It might have been a little bit more, but I mean, if Neil Farrell can do the same stuff at a player minimum and is 3-4 years younger, that might put Nandi in a tough situation.
Yeah. Are there any there that you think? I'm trying to put out a word. Are there any players there that you think that you're going to let go that may put your team at a disadvantage simply because your team is wanting to develop somebody else? So, some teams will say, man, you know what? That rookie showed out so well that we think that by mid-season, there'll be less of a drop-off. But for right now, that the team is almost well aware that they're basically putting themselves at a disadvantage up front. Do you think any of those kind of players are that for you?
No, I mean, not. I don't think that. I mean, I'd say probably the only one are the three receivers I talked about, which could certainly come back to bite them as the season progresses, or if an injury happens or something like that, just because they lost a little bit of that. I don't want to call it elite, but pretty solid depth, across the board. But at the same time, if they're getting rid of the three of Hardman, Justin Watson, or Kadarius Toney, that would tell me that Xavier Worthy is as advertised through the preseason, and that they feel with Hollywood Brown, they're good. So I don't really know if any of the guys that I talked about would be in that situation. I guess to answer your question, I think the only one that I think could really be that type of situation is if they decide to move on from Noah Gray and Irv Smith at that second tight end position, because they feel that Jared Wiley is can take that role over now. And I don't think that's the right move, because I think Wiley was certainly a future investment, and hope that he can learn from Kelsey and maybe be part of that. But I don't know that he's the type of that they should be thrusting him into anything right now. And I think that that number 2 tight end position's kind of been a crucial one as Kelsey's aged, and even last year, I mean, they utilize 22 person or 12 personnel, any of that. I mean, they utilize it quite a bit, and so I mean, I think that could come back to kind of haunt them if they do decide to move. I mean, and you see a lot of articles out there already talking about stuff like that. And I know it's kind of griping over the number 2 spot, but I mean, every position's important. And I think that with how last year started, and just, where Kelsey's at in age and everything else, I think that could ultimately be, kind of a backbreaking one if they let the rookie kind of be number 2, right out of the gate.
Well, and the fact that Mahomes does like throwing to the tight ends in seam routes and some crossers.
Oh, yeah.
Those are bread and butter type plays for him. And to your point, development and getting a guy that can help out there, it actually makes you wonder if they'll go lighter on another position to go heavier on tight ends, to give themselves, we'll call it some leeway when it comes to the potential of injury, and just even almost what they did last year, which is they seemingly just didn't use Kelsey very much in the beginning portions of the season. And then when the games actually mattered, I mean, and not that regular season games don't matter, but given the fact that you made it to the playoffs, when the rubber hits the road and you needed the win, you all knew that it was going to Kelsey. Kelsey was going to be, the guy.
Yeah. And it'd be curious too, if, because Noah Gray's going into his last year of his rookie deal, I think. They signed Irv Smith, who, I mean, is a uber athletic tight end. Just kind of hasn't. He was on the Bengals last year, but and then drafted Wiley, who's essentially like a sort of kind of molded after Kelsey in some degrees of how he became a tight end and plays the position. And it'd be curious if they tried to kind of load manage Kelsey until we get later into the year and use those guys more. Because I think ultimately Irv Smith's the odd man out, and they signed him in case they couldn't get a Wiley or whoever else they were targeting, and it worked out in the draft. And I think he's probably the one that gets shown the curb. But I think that by them investing kind of early in tight end, that's also somewhat a sign that they, get where Kelsey's at in his career, but also understand like when they need him. And that's not, weeks 1 through 8 really.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. So as we move forward, I actually, between Robert and I'm struggling as to which team between us will actually be the more difficult one to figure out. And part of the reason why I'm making the comment for my Denver Broncos is we are again in kind of the secondary transition as our head coaches come in. Robert is in the first year of that same transition when his new coaches come in. And I think the difference, if you will, between where our two coaches are is simply like they're very opinionated, they are very structured, and they very much have their own way of doing things. Simple, right? Now with the Raiders coach there, he kind of already knows exactly who's on the roster because he's been there a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so he's in a bit more of a unique position. And by unique, I mean, he could have made many, many changes in the offseason if he needed to, given the fact that he knows the players, knows that they're capable of, knows where their limits are, so on and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. And so any changes that should or would have been done, you would think would have already been made in some form of wholesale changes, or at least starting phases of getting those guys out. So, Jack, I'd like to see the Raiders say top 5 kind of roster bubble guys that some of us may know and some of us may not. And if you can just put that in the chat, Jack, given the fact that you're not well, we'll put that on screen for all of our Raiders fans here joining us live, and we'll go from there. But Robert, I'm going to throw over to you just because the chat and the folks here haven't seen you in a little bit, and let's get some Chargers info live on air here on the channel, and I'll go third, and then we'll throw Jack's comments up after at the very end for all the Raiders fans here.
Yeah, it's kind of like you were saying, Richie. We're kind of in a weird time especially for Chargers fans. If anybody knows, any Chargers fans, real Chargers fans know, it's been a lot of the same for the past, go back with this past decade plus, with Telesco as the GM and, whoever was there a head coach. It was more or less the same thing. It was, okay, our first round picks are going to probably go in and play, and let's just see if anybody from picks 2 through 7 will even get any playing time this year. And if they do, it's probably because our starters got hurt and we're forced to just throw them in. So a lot of the times we haven't even been really able to look at our depth with like optimistic lenses, to say the least. But this year it definitely feels different. It definitely feels like each roster spot is important, and it's not just being overlooked by, the coaching staff or even the front office. And I found it kind of tough trying to look at trying to find some players or positions that, I could see us cutting players, because, let's be real, we're really not in any position to be picky about talent. We're pretty barren in terms of our talent. So that's why I was just going to look over at wide receiver, because we currently have 11 signed onto the roster, and with the way that this is going to go, with the way Harbaugh wants to run this team, with not Gus Bradley, Who? Oh my God, why am I totally
Roman.
Greg Roman? Thank you. Jesus Christ, Gus Bradley. I don't know where that came from.
Started with a G.
Yeah, started with a G. Yeah, with Greg Roman, and obviously having it be a run first defense or offense. I think the wide receivers are going to be a position that we're not incredibly locked in on. Obviously, Ladd McConkey is somebody who's going to be there. I think Quentin Johnston still stays there. He's young enough and hasn't played enough to where they're not ready to give up on him quite yet. I mean, you did put a first round pick into him last year, so you do really got to pray he does work out in some degree, whether that's, somehow in the slot or whatever it is. You just got to pray that you get, because you're not going to get what value you drafted him at. You drafted him at 22 or whatever, and there was other wide receivers there that went after you, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, whatever it is, that you could have easily taken. And yeah, the first round pick would have been worth it. But we'll see. We'll see what goes on with him. But as far as that, the other wide receivers, I think Simi Fehoko is going to be somebody that can definitely be cut. He wasn't much of a contributor last year. He was like fourth. I think he was our fourth string or fifth string. Saw playing time because of obviously the injuries, but I didn't really think last year or even into this year that he was gonna perform. He would just be kind of like a roster body or a camp body,
Jag.
to say the least.
A Jag.
Yeah, exactly. A Jag,
Jag.
just another guy. Yep, yeah,
I thought you
exactly.
were
So
saying Jack.
So yeah, I just don't see him. He's in his I think this is going into his fourth year or into his fifth year, one of the two. I just don't see him with the guys we drafted: Cornelius Johnson, Brendan Rice, obviously Ladd McConkey, Josh Palmer still there. I just think I also like Darius Davis, although he's definitely more of a kind of a gadget kick return, punt return guy. Not so much out there running routes and things like that. But we saw it a couple times last year. You call up, draw up a good play for him. He can execute. Dude's got great downhill speed. He could just get going like almost in a flash. And we saw that at TCU. That's while the Chargers kind of went after that. We hadn't really had a good recovery, punt return, kick return man. And man, I can't even really remember the last good one we had. I think Sproles, honestly, was like the last consistent great return man, and he was more so a running back, if anything. But yeah, looking over at the roster too, I was looking over at the running back position. Obviously J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. They're coming over, so that they're kind of like Gus Edwards is not as much because he actually has played a little bit more and has had some more solid time not being injured. J.K. Dobbins is kind of like the big one. It's not so much we're going to see him off the roster or if he's not going to have a roster spot, but I think, with them drafting Kamani Vidal, I kind of could see a situation maybe where if Kamani is really, that good, or he's showing why we drafted him, and he's able to maybe slide into that RB2 spot. I mean, like I said, if any of these guys, obviously Joe Alt, he's starting, first round pick. Second round pick McConkey, he's starting. Third round pick Junior Colson, he's starting on defense. So it's like pretty much fourth round and on. You're really just hoping to get some A or one or two starters potentially would be nice. But I mean, we're really just looking for depth pieces here. And we're kind of going off a little bit of nothing because we haven't seen this team play yet. So we really don't know who's guaranteed a spot and who's not. You kind of have a feeling the people who have already guaranteed their spots, the veterans on the team, Bosa, Mack, those guys don't really need to be named anymore. But I just think it's going to be a bloodbath, I think, in training camp. I think Harbaugh is going to have these dudes competing. He's going to we're going to start to see the first round of cuts. And there's probably going to be some people that we cut in the first couple rounds where I'm going to be surprised, damn, or a couple rookies that I'm really excited about. And I think maybe they have a chance. And, Harbaugh is going to see something in them that we got to go in a different direction. So there's just a lot of unknown right now. And it's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a bad thing for me trying to talk about it because there's not much to really go off of, and you're kind of just playing it, how it's been thrown at you with the draft and everything, and trying to read in between the lines and things like that. But it's great because it's something different. It's something completely different than what the Chargers have always been used to doing. They've been the same consistent. Here we go. We're fringe wild card team. We're going to go all in next season. And then it's just a complete dumpster fire. And you go completely the opposite direction and what you thought you were building on something. And it really just got destroyed. So I think this season is going to be a lot of players kind of finding their roles. I think probably I'll say halfway through the season, or maybe by like week 7 or 8, I think we'll have kind of a more solidified understanding of what the set roster is going to be. I expect Harbaugh to kind of not mix and match, but I definitely expect him to play around with some of the pieces that he has and kind of seeing, what he wants to do with it, seeing who's working well together and who's not. But yeah, it's as far as like roster bubble and things and people who others I see on not being able to possibly make the cut. Kind of looking over at the O-line too. I know Jamari Salier kind of got washed out of the potential starting 5. There was a lot of talks that he was going to be in that potential starting 5 rotation. Obviously, that's not the case. So now you kind of look at it in the sense of like, is he going to be a swing tackle, swing guard, somebody? I fully expect him to be somebody that stays, on the team just as like a backup. He had starting experience last season, played with some of the other O linemen on their last season. So, that familiarity, that chemistry should be there. We did see him play, pretty well, all things considered, a couple times last year in the moments that he was thrown in there. But yeah, it's just tough. A lot of the guys I feel like who would maybe be bubble spots and, potential cuts maybe aren't on this team because there's just still so much unknown. But yeah, I fully expect to see a lot of competition in the training camps. I don't think it's going to be handed out. Harbaugh's not the type of coach to just hand out, roster spots because of your name or whatever. You got to earn every rep, every snap you get. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's going to happen and the storyline for training camp for us this year.
Yeah, it's I can't even predict. This is like
exactly
is the weird thing, right?
Yeah.
This is like
It's
the
so
weirdest
hard.
thing, right? Like normally I can look at your offense or look at your OC and say, "Oh no, don't worry about it."
Mm-hmm.
Like your OC runs like an inside or outside zone or a power or whatever. You can kind of like assess the players that you kind of seen and say, "Oh, well, at least you drafted, X, Y, and Z guy." And, so your old aging guy that's there is probably not going to be there anymore after training camp or after the preseason. And that young guy is going to take over, yay, so on and so forth.
Yep.
But you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's kind of the key thing here with what we're seeing with Harbaugh as your new coach, which is
like the Chargers motto this offseason. You don't know what you don't know.
right. And so
smoke and mirrors, baby.
Right. No, but the kicker is that, is he going to bring back the same offense that he had in San Francisco? Is he going to do that? Or is he bringing in flavors from college that he's used to because he thinks that it might work well at the NFL level? Or is he going in a completely different direction? And is he basically going to start, hybriding a bunch of different offenses together to kind of come up with something that he thinks is, even more unique or different or whatever? The one thing I do think that you can expect is obviously a heavy and strong running game from a Harbaugh-led offense, which is going to be a departure from what you guys have traditionally had. You guys have typically had
it's been a lot more pass heavy, to say the least.
Yeah, more pass heavy and a little bit more finesse and that sort of thing.
I mean, can you really, like, not to try to go too far away from it or stray from it, but it's kind of tough to blame us when you really look at the history of like our team. And the last big running back we had that was just full on, just give him 400 carries a season was LT. And that ever since then, we've never had a running back that's even come close to that. or
No, I mean Melvin Gordon should have been that guy though.
should have been 100%.
About Ryan Matthews, dude.
The guy who dipped his hands in melted butter before every game. Yeah, no, thank you. But yeah, 100%. Completely agree that Melvin Gordon should have been that guy and should have been the reason why Phil Riv may have had like a quote-unquote resurgence in his second part of his career, because we saw in 2018 what that team could do. Phil Riv was still playing really well. Keenan Allen was at the top of his game. Mike Will was having a great season. The run game was all right. It wasn't terrible. And they went 12-4. That was the season in which they had the big win in KC to end that like 8-year drought or whatever it was of losing to them. So I am all for giving Herbert a run game and giving him a solid run game and a run game that teams are going to have to respect and not just go into our games and be like, all right, that's the guy we're going to have to stop. Absolutely no passing of the ball. So I don't know. I'm not sure kind of what. Give me 1 second, y'all.
So, I mean, there's some interesting pieces with the Chargers there that Robert is bringing up, which is like, okay, so he needs our strong running game. Fair enough. And with Harbaugh, they're likely going to get that. Fair enough. But then the question is, well, who's going to be that running back? Who's going to be the star of that running game? And who's going to be, the second, third, and fourth running back, or second and third running back in that, room, who's going to help contribute to that success within that group and in that room.
Does it sound better now?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank God.
It sounded like
all right.
Like
sorry about that. Don't know what that was all about.
Changer. I was like, is this
to answer your question really quickly, Rich? That's also kind of why I said Kamani Vidal. If he's going to be that guy, to step up and be a starter, that's really what you're hoping for from these late round draft picks, because you don't know really what you're getting with them. So if, like I said, I loved our first 3 picks. They're guaranteed starters day one. I don't think anybody's going to dispute that. So if you're able to get anything out of these back 4 or 5 picks, I would consider it successful. And I think the Chargers will have a successful season, because that's something they've always lacked, that back half, day 2, day 3 draft depth that we've never been able to just seem to get our mark hit on. We'll maybe get a guy who's got a 1-year wonder here or there, and then that's kind of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting. It's like I said, I'm
It's a lot of unknown.
There's just two. There's like, okay, it could go this way. Oh, in that case, then it's that guy and this team and this guy and then that guy and then that. It's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That was like, literally my thought process when you sent the email about like today's show, and you're like, oh, let's talk about bubble players, and I'm like, okay, and I'm like, man, who's a bubble player?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. So, now, do you think any of your bubble guys that you think might be on the bubble? Well, here, let's go back and go a different direction. Who do you think that Harbaugh will take an opportunity to outright cut that your fan base would be surprised by?
Oh man, that's so funny you say that, because this name popped into my head thinking about guys he would potentially cut. I don't see him doing it because of some of the relationship he has with the team, but if I was going to name one person that he may cut, and this is, again, totally dependent on how the rookies perform and, what he sees in training camp. But I honestly, if Asante Samuel Jr. gets cut or traded, it wouldn't, I wouldn't read that news and be like, oh my God, no way, how could you do that? It would be more so like yeah, that seems like something Harbaugh would do. I could see that. So yeah, probably ASJ. Yeah, but the thing is, that's this is all totally dependent, because this team is so barren. I feel like there's some players that Harbaugh who would normally cut, he necessarily can't, because it's like so early in the tenure and he's still trying to figure this team out. And I mean, he already gutted the wide receiver room, basically, you know, traded away all those guys. So he's already definitely building this team in his view, obviously, as he should. But I don't think, I mean, I think Keenan Allen was definitely the one that everybody was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a 4th round pick for him? Like, really? Like, damn, I'm gonna disrespect him like that. But besides that, he hasn't really had any. I mean, there also isn't really any big names on the team that we were gonna cut. But I think ASJ would be, if I had to give it to one, he would be the guy I would see Harbaugh cutting, barring, you know, he sees something from these rookies, you know, any of the guys that he drafted, whether it would be what was his name, Cam Hart, Tarheeb Steele. Like, if he sees anything out of these guys that he drafts, you know, maybe. But yeah, it's tough for Harbaugh right now. You know, he's made his decisions on how to cut the team up, and now we're kind of on that back half of it. It's like, okay, this is your team now. Who's in, who's out, which is, as you can see right below here, right here.
Little tagline.
Yeah, a little tagline. Who's in, who's out. So I'm excited. It's going to be a great camp for sure.
So my not so low key and you know horn entry, you know, would be I could see Quinn Johnson getting cut straight up.
Damn.
I told you that like 3 shows ago, and you're like, he's not gonna cut somebody that's in their 2nd year, and I'm like, dude, you never know.
No, but I have a caveat though to my comment, which is
all right,
only if he doesn't show like
only if he doesn't perform.
Yeah, only he doesn't
basically.
No, but like the point is that last year, regardless of his poor performance, the guy was going to be on the roster because you simply spent a 1st round pick on him.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep. And the regime that drafted him is no longer there.
Right.
So so now, you know, I see kind of him sitting on a boiler right now with a flame under his feet and saying, do better. And so then the question is he going to do better? And if he is going to do better, then maybe he's, you know, then right. how much and does he stick around for it? And then on the flip side of that, you made a few comments on some other players that are maybe more fixed style players. So like quick speed or, you know, whatever the case may be. Well, at first glance, you might say, well, Rich, those guys are very limited. And then my comment back would be, yeah, they might be limited, but if Harbaugh is wanting to go to a hybrid version of like a college/NFL system, then he could well look to value a quick, shifty speed guy,
for athletes,
right?
Yeah.
And like an athlete kind of dude to say, all right, there's like 11 plays that we want this guy to run. However, they're going to be intermixed into the entire playbook so that the look is going to be the same. So one play that guy might get the ball for, you know, play 1 through 13 or 1 through 10. But yet at the same time, the next play that same look is given, then is a run play.
Yeah, I think the style of offense that Harbaugh is going to attempt to run is going to be, obviously this is going to sound very cliche, but it's going to be something that we've never seen him run before. And the reason why I say that is because he has a quarterback of a caliber that he's never had before. Therefore, there's so many other things that you're able to open up your offense towards because you have that guy at QB. You know, like, and that's not to, you know, poo-poo on anything about Kaepernick or Alex Smith or anything like that. You know, he had, or, you know, JJ McCarthy, you know, he had solid quarterback play and he had the guys that were able to get it done. And he also adjusted the offense to tailor to those guys to make them look even better than maybe they thought they were. The difference now and why it's so exciting for the Chargers is because we kind of already know what Herbert can do. We saw that in the past 4 years. So now it's become the question of what can Herbert do with an offense or with a what's the word? With a very wise head coach who knows what his strengths are on the team and what his weaknesses are. And he's going to build the offense around that. I don't think it's going to be something as simple as like, 70-30 running passing, or it's like this, we're going to run this many run plays and this many pass plays in the game. And like, this is our plan. I think it's going to be a very fluid offense, kind of like a very free. I think Harbaugh is going to give Herbert a ton of freedom in the offense. I think he's going to, because we've seen Herbert at the line, and he's very good at the line, checking down, checking into runs, checking into whatever it may be. So I think he's going to give Herbert the liberty to say, like, we're running it here on second down, whatever. If there's something you see and you like it, audible to it. We're not going to sit here. It's not going to be a Kellen Moore or a Brandon Staley thing where it's like, here's the play, you got to run this play. There's no ifs, ands, ors, or buts about it. This is what we're running. I think that's going to give, and it's also going to let Herbert feel a lot more better about the offense that he's in, a lot more comfortable in it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. And yeah, DZ, I've heard some similar things in terms of the Chargers offense, in terms of some adaptations and things. What'll be another interesting piece for the Chargers, Robert, is your use of tight ends in your scheme.
Yes.
So, I mean, you've obviously got, a Hall of Fame tight end that you've had on your roster before.
Mm-hmm.
Great. But you haven't really done much with the tight end since, if you're going to be honest. And in addition to that, blocking with the tight end, you guys haven't done a tremendous amount of in terms of, mixing up that scheme either. And so that'll be a very interesting thing to see how your team prioritizes that position, if it prioritizes that position, and moreover, which guys you have on the roster fit kind of, we'll call it column A of a tight end, and then which ones may not fit column A but fit column B, and then which ones are the odd man out, right? Which is
right.
If you don't do either well, then
you got to go.
You got to go. And basically, column A is your pass catching tight end. So you have like your Jimmy Grahams who were dog water when it came to blocking. And
that's putting it lightly.
And a wet paper bag started laughing at Jimmy Graham.
A wet paper bag would put up more resistance.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And said, "Here, hold my beer. I got this."
Yeah.
And did compared to him. And so so that was Jimmy Graham. So that's kind of column A, right? Which is your elite
red zone threats
kind of guy, red zone threat, which is kind
Donald
of
Parham. And he's not even that, that
That's
great at it.
6'8".
But it's because he's 6'8", exactly. Which, quick sidebar on that, by the way. Why do you not just throw fades to a guy who's 6'8"? I'm looking at, there's some games last year where I see Parham lining up against like a 5'11", 6-foot corner. I'm like, dude, what are we doing here? This should be a touchdown every day of the week. And you're just like, it's like, it just blows my mind. Sorry, I needed to rant about that.
You got to think though, that corner has like a 45-inch vertical, and
Parham has a 45-inch vertical, not even jumping.
Separation from him though.
Just one hand out and the other one.
Try.
Yeah. So the question is that who fits the mold of the pass catcher, who fits the mold of the run blocker and blocking role, inline blocker role. And then exactly, and then the question is that do you have like a Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski,
Hayden Hurst, baby?
Someone in that mold, or like
if we do, Rich, we're going so far this year. If we have the next Gronk or Kelce in our camp somewhere, my God!
I don't necessarily mean that you're going to have someone who's elite at pass catching, but here, I'll throw a name out there that you guys may be familiar from my Denver Broncos, just because I can only really leverage players that I follow enough to know enough. So there was a guy by the name of Joel Dreesen who was on the Denver Broncos when Peyton Manning was here. He was an exceptionally talented inline blocker. Like the dude was he was excellent at an inline blocker. However, he developed as a pass catcher, and when Peyton Manning came here, he started to work on those routes, and he started to work on kind of getting separation and that kind of stuff. And he actually became a very well-rounded tight end when he came here from Houston to the Denver Broncos. And in fact, he caught quite a number of very critical catches for Peyton Manning in his time here to end up with the records that we were ending up getting with Peyton Manning. And that's a huge deal, right? Getting a guy like that is a solid inline blocker and even an above average pass catcher is perfectly fine. Like there is nothing wrong with that as a an ebb and flow for a tight end for your team. The odds of you getting a Travis Kelce or Rob Gronkowski or someone in that caliber who can literally, like, let's put it this way. Rob Gronkowski was as good as an inline blocker as a right or left tackle, and it didn't matter.
Yep.
Like literally, he was that good. I don't know if you've seen like the All 22 film on him with him blocking. It is ridiculous how good he was at inline blocking as a tight end. And then when you add that on to the fact that the guy's like 6'7" and can run, get himself wide open. I mean, that's a dangerous man right there. There's a reason why, people
he's
are
as great as
him
he
on,
is.
Yeah, well, there's a reason why I think it's a fairly well-known, even like Shannon Sharp and those guys have
almost dominant tight end
they
ever.
basically say like that dude's like he's
his
kind of
prime was better than anyone's.
Yeah, he's the gold. Yeah, he's the gold standard.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. I think Kelsey's obviously done it longer. So as far as collectively, he's definitely the all around just the best tight end. But if we're taking just 5 years maybe of prime, I mean, it's Gronk all day, dude. I mean, you had multiple guys going at his legs because there was just no point in attempting a wrap-up tackle anywhere above his waist because you were just going to get thrown off. And
the crazy thing is he didn't even know the playbook. He was doing all that without
you just
even
saw
knowing what
he's
the
like,
hell he was
which
supposed to do.
Which arrow am I? That one? Okay, cool. I can do that.
Me catch football.
That's honestly though, and you say that, Rich. That it's honestly why I'm so sad Hunter Henry never re-signed with us. Now, given the state of what happened with the team, he probably would have ended up leaving. But it was just he was that guy. Now I'm not going to say he's Gronk or anything, but he was a very serviceable, good blocker on the line. He was a great blocking tight end, and then he had really good hands out in the field. He wasn't the smoothest route runner, but he could absolutely get open. He had great reliable hands, and I really thought he was going to be the next, quote unquote Gates, the next great Chargers tight end, to pair with Herbert for his career. And he wanted to go get money and rot away in New England, so I can't really blame him for that, but just can't help what could have been.
Pretty effective in New England too, with like trash QB play. So,
oh man,
right. So, was there anyone on that list or in your grouping that you think would be detrimental to your team? Same. A lot of podcasts out there are doing roster bubble or way too early 53-man predictions and that kind of stuff. But the one question that I find that nobody answers, and I think that the fans really want to know, is are there any players that you think are going to get cut that will, at the very least on the onset, be seen as,
thank God.
That's a problem.
Oh, like if we cut somebody and we come away with it saying like, oh, why would we ever do that?
Mm-hmm.
But be realistic about it. Don't say Herbert.
No, yeah, Joe Alt, man. Oh man,
Justin Herbert, Rich.
Man, that's a tough one because, like I said, and we were kind of saying earlier, Harbaugh is kind of in a place where he's already kind of cut the guys. We can kind of look back on and be like, fuck, why? Like, why would you cut him? Like, or why would you trade him? So I mean, that's tough to say the least. I think, oh man, if you know what, if I think if we were to cut, I don't see this happening, and I'd be extremely pissed if it did. So I'll go with him. I'm gonna go with Morgan Fox, our DT, or 56, our one of our D tackles. He isn't in or wasn't a part of the, as we talked about the Harbaugh regime. He was in the regime previous. So there's obviously that, there's no, really strings attached to him or anything. But he's just such a solid player, man. Like every rep, every snap of the ball, he is doing anything and he can to get, whether it's get to the quarterback, whether it's holding up a double team, trying to, like, the dude is just, he's just a great football player. I can't really look at something or like things in particular that he's like amazing at or even elite at or great at even, but he just does so many of the little things very well. And he's just such a huge part of that middle interior for as terrible as it's been for the past years. He has always been kind of like that. I don't want to say anchor, but he's definitely been like a solid rock, a solid foundational piece in that interior rush. And I think him, along with a lot of the other D tackles there, Puna Ford, somebody we just signed to, Hinton, Odatito Ogubunia, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. That was our fourth round pick, I think. I think they're gonna be probably the most important part of this defense, because if they're able to take that pressure off of Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Thule, Chris Rumph, our edge rushers, and they're able to give them one-on-one cover or one-on-one releases, avoid some of these double teams, make other teams respect the middle of our D line, I think our team will improve with it and thrive on it far more than we ever did previously, because we have some of that other talent around him. I think a lot of times his contributions to the defense went unnoticed because the defense was just so bad and you were just looking at all the negatives on it, and it was kind of hard to see the positives, but he did have a lot of positives with the team. So yeah, I think Morgan Fox, if Harbaugh were to cut him, I got to stick with Harbaugh and say, I trust the process, but obviously apart from the Keenan one, that one would hurt just as a football fan.
Yeah, I think if you hadn't seen Derek Wolfe is that guy for me with the Denver Broncos that was just, he showed up every day, did everything right, like the right way.
Yep.
And never really got the real credit he deserved for like the dirty yards that he stopped. Like, you know what I mean? Like those like, there is nothing pretty about the type of stuff that he had to do in his position with the Denver Broncos, right? He wasn't like the Von Miller that spun around a guy, ducked under, and kind of like slapped the ball out and was like, one of those, right? You ended up with Derek Wolfe, who would take on two guys, push one of the guys back into the quarterback, and then somebody else would get the sack, right? But the guy that did the dirty yards, the guy that did the dirty work, the guy that was,
the orchestrator.
Was kind of Derek Wolfe,
the infantry.
And then
I also love that it's Derek Wolfe and Morgan Fox are the two guys that we're talking about.
Yeah, and so he's I think a good example of a guy probably similar to that who, he got cut by the Broncos, and I actually think that he was able to get some a reasonable salary from the Ravens as a result. But right. He's a guy that I think if you had kept with the Broncos, like truly kept with the Broncos and kind of worked with him and kind of give him a reasonable salary and done what you needed to, I think he would have probably stuck around the Broncos organization even more than he already has. And I think that he'd just be kind of the guy, like you couldn't get rid of him. And that's not a bad thing, because you want a guy who has a high motor like that around your team to show these young guys that, work ethic matters.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important.
That's
I'm going
a
to shift.
big reason. Sorry, really quick. I was saying that's a big reason too why I think he won't get cut is because he just has so many of those embodiments that Harbaugh loves.
So I'm going to bring up just a quick answer to Jack. No, I bring up Wolf because I think he embodies a tremendous number of forgotten NFL player qualities in a lot of modern day NFL players. Also, if you hear him speak, he and I share what I would argue is a very similar worldview. I think from what I'm hearing, just how he
He's a friend of the network too, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. Yes, he is. But just when you hear him speak and you hear his kind of general vantage points on most things, he and I seem to align on a good number of things. It seems that probably our parents instilled similar work ethics into us. So there's a lot of relatable qualities that I've been able to kind of, recognize within Derek when he speaks that I can that's basically how I was raised.
Preach it, brother.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, brother.
Yeah. And it's like, he's like, I don't understand why I don't understand why you guys are like whining on the sideline. I don't get it. And it's like, yep, I agree. Throw some dirt on it, shut up and go play. You know what I mean? And so he's got that kind of mentality. Now, if I'm going to tie this back, Jack, to your team, Wolf and Crosby actually remind me a little bit of one another in terms of their mannerisms. Right. Well, Chris Jones, I don't think has the same mental mindset as Derek Wolf, but he has obviously incredible production.
Yeah. He's a tactician. Chris Jones is.
But he's just a large man.
Yeah.
He's like
I've never
6'6", 330. That's
the
unit.
God damn, he's 330, man.
Something. He's big
That's
boy.
Insane.
So
I might have misquoted that. Let me look.
Like, for example, Chris Jones as an example, I've never heard him in an interview, so I can't really make a comment in terms of kind of how I've heard him present himself. However, how he handled his off-season negotiations with the Chiefs, I have to assume some things about him because he handled it just like a pro's pro.
Perfectly.
Yeah,
if we're being honest.
Like a pro's pro. And so I would assume that he and I are probably closer aligned than we are further apart. We'll put it that way. But I would certainly say that Max Crosby and I seem to be Derek Wolf, Max Crosby seem to have a similar approach, which is like, you're playing a contact sport. What did you expect?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
embrace the contact.
Oh, they thrive off it. Max Crosby, they love it. They love the contact.
I was a little off on Chris Jones, 20 pounds
310.
310. Still a big boy.
Still a big boy.
6'6", 310, still pretty damn huge.
Yeah, so. Yeah, that is not well, I mean, and Derek Wolf he's either, I think he's 6'4" and 275.
Yeah. Also big man.
Yeah. Morgan Fox isn't even like built in that regard. That's why I say, he's rated as a defensive end on the website, but he definitely plays more at the DT spot. But yeah, the dude's only like 6'3", 275, so he doesn't have, the girth or the weight that some of these D tackles have, but I mean, kind of in a very, very small Chris Jones sense. Not trying to compare him to Chris Jones, but very, very tactical. Very, very tactical defensive tackle, and yeah. Hope we.
Sorry, I was wrong. Derek Wolf is 6'5", 285, which is still
even bigger.
Yeah, that's even bigger. Yeah, that's a big dude, right? So,
damn.
but again, yeah, exactly. So I'm gonna go into my Denver Broncos, and then Jack, don't worry, I have not forgotten your.
I noted
comment.
all Jack's comments, so
Yeah,
we got them.
yeah. So this year's really difficult for me actually with the Broncos when I'm analyzing the roster. It's a coin flip for me in terms of the direction that the team may or may not go in. So for starters, you drafted Bo Nix, right? Now, traditionally speaking, when you draft a rookie, if you want them to start, you want a strong run game. Now, another thing traditionally is if you start a rookie quarterback, they typically don't do well as a rookie, or even if they do well, they typically never win a Super Bowl for you because you started them too soon. And so it's a real conundrum actually to put your team in to start the rookie and all that sort of thing. And then you also need a very strong O-line, and there are some gaps on the Denver Broncos O-line, which I've not been shy in calling out. Now, when I'm looking at the roster, I think the number one thing to kind of bring forward would be the wide receiver room. It would be my opinion that Tim Patrick stays and Courtland Sutton gets traded.
I agree with that.
And I think that that's how the Broncos navigate this offseason. I think that the Broncos are thinking and are likely going to be correct in their, wait and see sort of game, which is that we are likely going to see a wide receiver from a team, some team somewhere get hurt. And they are going to have a young quarterback that they believe, has a shot. So I'm thinking, it could be a team like the Texans with Stroud, for example. It could be, the Jets, for example, with Aaron Rodgers. It could be, a team in that mold is what I'm kind of getting
Panthers.
at. Right. Panthers, could be the Bears.
Saints.
It could be the Saints.
It could be. There's a lot of teams I think that could use a Courtland Sutton.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And so, in my opinion, I think that's what you're going to probably end up seeing. I think you're going to see him get traded. And yes, I do believe Courtland is a bubble player, Jack, 100%. That he is the first guy. He's also a guy that I think most of you know on my Denver Broncos as a player as well, which I'm sure you were surprised to hear me bring his name up. There are a few other guys that I want you to kind of remember in the back of your mind because I think that they're going to be reasons why he does get cut. One, there's Devon Vale, who we drafted in the 7th round. I believe he is effectively going to be a Tim Patrick / Courtland Sutton, younger replacement, although he is certainly one of the older draftees coming out of the draft. But that's besides the point. He's certainly younger, has a little bit more tread on the tire, and he is got that same height, size, speed blend that Sutton and Tim Patrick both have, which I think is going to be a tremendous benefit for my Denver Broncos. I also think you have a guy like
26.
Yeah.
You're like Brandon Whedon, 26-year-old rookie.
Yeah.
Damn.
So, no, but I'm serious. Like, and for those that are unfamiliar with the Broncos news that have come out as the training camp and everything has gone on, his name has been mentioned several times as being a guy that has shown out in all these kind of early rookie mini camps and all the other stuff. So I could certainly see him kind of cracking that 53-man roster there. We also have little Jordan Humphrey, who
great name,
a fantastic name. That's Lil with an apostrophe. Okay,
yes.
Just to be clear. Okay,
do not spell it wrong.
Yeah, don't misspell it. But he's another dude that's like 6'5", 6'6".
Not
6'4". Yeah. He is not little.
Nothing little about him.
No,
nothing little about little Jordan.
And then you got my guy Jalen Virgil, who I think is going to likely make the team. At least I hope he does. Then you got Brandon Johnson, Troy Franklin, who I think is a lock to make the roster because of Bo Nix. I think they want to kind of keep that connection together.
Yeah.
And then you got Josh Reynolds and Tim Patrick. So, and Marvin Mims, of course, there as well. So, in my opinion, I think Courtland Sutton is a guy that is kind of, he's done well, but not great.
Mm.
And
He's
I also think,
expendable.
I think he's expendable. I think Tim Patrick is a grittier player and fits better into Peyton's offense than Courtland Sutton does, who's more of a finesse, toss it up and catch.
And I think Troy Franklin's kind of similar mold to Sutton. So it's like you don't need two big-bodied, contested catch guys, in an offense that utilizes quick processing and getting the ball out quick.
Yeah. And so I certainly see Sutton as being a roster bubble / trade player, depending on how the Broncos decide to dispose of him. And I'm using that word intentionally. Because I think because I think that's probably kind of the direction they're likely going in. And then we get into some really interesting territory with the offensive line, which is one of my favorite position groups because I think they're so important.
I think it might be your favorite.
It might be, yeah. So we have Frank Crum, we have Alex Plazowski, we have Mike McGlinchey, and those are just the right tackles. And Mike McGlinchey looked like trash last year.
We know how much you love him.
Yeah, but he's got a fat cap hit, doesn't he?
He does.
That didn't stop him from getting rid of Russ.
He does, but when you look at where we're at this season with the Denver Broncos, and we're talking roster bubble guys, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not intentionally trying to be, antagonistic or be a protagonist here on the show and be
never.
Like, no. Well, how many times have I been right though?
Right? Yeah, that's true. I'll give you that.
No, I mean, I will start dialing things back a little bit when I'm not right anymore, and I have to adjust. For now, though, I have a really good track record, so I'm going to keep with it. Which is, Mike McGlinchey was a former regime acquisition by the old front office prior to Sean Payton being able to have full control over that front office and those decisions. And I think part of the reason for, and this is like cart, horse, chicken, egg moment, right? Which is one of the reasons I think Sean Payton got more control over the front office was because of Mike McGlinchey. Right? It's like you bring in a dude and he doesn't look good. And then Sean Payton was like, well, I had to play him because you basically paid him so much damn money. And then it's like, the dude ain't good.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I think that we could see someone like an Alex Plazowski or, Quinn Bailey or a combination of the two, or even a Frank Crum, maybe kind of step in and really, overshine and kind of push Mike out as the right tackle there. My top pick for that would potentially be Alex Plazowski, who looked legit last year in preseason and then got hurt. So long as Alex is able to kind of, show that injury was a fluke rather than the norm, which again is a valid question as well. He's too new to the team, so I just can't tell you A versus B. I think that's something to kind of keep an eye on. And then the other one will be left guard, just in terms of who gets slotted there, because it's a pretty light position. And then the other one is what happens with Garrett Bowles. Yep. And of course, people are like, well, Rich, you're not going to get rid of Garrett Bowles. He's been your starting left tackle and and so on and so forth. It's like, well, if they like some of the other guys that they have in depth there and they're wanting to move on from him anyway, and let's say a left tackle from another team gets hurt and another team comes knocking and says, are you willing to trade Garrett? Because, you guys seem to also like Matt Pert or even DeMontre Jacobs, who are the depth folks there, then I wouldn't necessarily say that it's out of the realm of possibility that the Broncos may look to move in a different direction. Just as a point of order there, because a lot of these guys that we're looking at, like Garrett Bowles, is part of that old regime, that kind of Justin Simmons group of players, that all Cortland Sutton, that all got their deals around the same time from the former regime that was here before. And so I think it's a reasonable assumption that if Sean Payton doesn't like their attitude or their play, or doesn't believe that they're a proper fit for his vision for the team, that they could well be gone. Looking to the defensive side, one more thing, just because I think it's important, is the running back room for my Denver Broncos is going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah. I've already been seeing ramblings of that.
Like an absolute bloodbath.
Who do you see making it?
So my guesses are these guys. I think that we are going to end up with Samaje Perine, Audric Estime, Jaleel McLaughlin will be the 3 running backs that make the Denver Broncos roster.
I was waiting for the Jaleel McLaughlin. I was like, damn.
Goodbye, Javonte.
And then in my opinion, Javonte may well be another one of those guys that's like a 6th round or 7th round pick that the Broncos get right near the roster cut deadline, because there's going to be some team out there that says, I think we can develop.
Flyer,
we'll take a flyer. And frankly, we don't think a guy that we pick in the 6th or 7th round will be as good. So I could see them going that. Yes, DZ.
It's team to cut Javonte, dude.
Yes. Yeah. And so that's my thought on the running back room for my Denver Broncos. And my general thought process is this, DZ, which is Javonte never looked the same after his injury. And while it's possible that he could bounce back and then start to look like his old self, at which point, obviously, my comments change, right? Like, you just have to be honest. But he didn't run with that same physicality. He didn't embrace the physicality of the game like he did in his rookie season prior to getting hurt. And the question is that the first year jitters after getting such a traumatic knee injury, or is this a permanent mental state that he has that he can't get over now at the NFL level, where it's like, seeing ghosts when you're playing with the Jets or whatever the case may be. And I don't think that's a risk that the Broncos need to take. I think Audric is certainly someone that doesn't have that same baggage and certainly plays with a similar physicality and has some of the same dynamic playmaking capabilities.
Yeah, Javonte is a perfect addition to the Chargers running back room.
I agree. I mean, given the fact that the Chargers love having players get hurt by about week 8.
Well, yeah, you got to think Dobbins. If you have Dobbins, Edwards,
he's
and
probably going to be hurt.
You're going to end up with one of them by the time.
Week
9.
Yeah, that's true. Come on, Kamani.
And then I got to kind of round this out with I'm going to go I'm going to say safeties I think is going to be too predictable. I'm going to say the inside linebackers. I think we're going to see one of the acquisitions that we had in the offseason perhaps get bumped. And the roster has to change somewhere. The roster has to adapt to allow for depth to be at various positions, because I believe the Broncos are going to keep 3 quarterbacks given the composition of that room right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to make up that other roster position that you're taking up with that 3rd quarterback on your roster. you need to come up with that extra spot somewhere. And I think that the Broncos are going to be willing to try to tuck either one of their undrafted free agent guys for the inside backer spot, or cutting one of their guys that they don't think will make it, that they think will make it to their practice squad, that they can use as like a rotational call-up guy. Another one is LaVille Bailey, who is the college free agent. We got about 2 or 3 college free agents who I think are actually going to make the Denver Broncos roster this year. And I think a couple of them will be either fringe starters or a second on the depth chart, which is rather remarkable considering they weren't even drafted in this year's draft yet. I think they're going to be pretty high up. He has been absolutely lauded and just, glowing reviews from the coaching staff from the offseason with the Denver Broncos. So I think he even has potential to start, pushing guys like, Cody Barton, and certainly, with Drew Sanders getting hurt, and also having rumored to have moved to outside backer rather than inside backer, I think you have a tremendous potential there of a 2-3 man rotation with LaVille Bailey being that guy, that number 3 guy, which is, again, going from undrafted to, 1C on an NFL roster is I mean, good for you. Good for you.
Hell of a hill to go climb.
Yeah. And just to kind of round things off, my outside kind of flyer guy that might get cut from the Broncos in favor of Thomas Yasmin is Greg Dulcich.
Wow.
I can't have that. I'm heavily invested in Dulcich and Dynasty.
So
that can't be true.
So the issue I have with Dulcich is
he's made of paper mache.
He's
got look at him. He's on the IR.
Yeah, he's got every. You would think that the dude's going to be just lights out.
The beast. Yeah.
Beast.
He fits the mold for a Sean Payton tight end too.
He does.
So it's like, come on.
He does. And but yet Lucas Krull keeps on outshining him. Not only is Krull able to run routes crisply and stay on the field and be healthy, but he's got that great blend that Sean Payton covets at the tight end position, which is the combination, as we were talking about earlier, Robert, with your tight end room with the Chargers, which is, A versus B. Where do you fit? Can you run routes well?
Block.
Yeah. And if you are a guy like Eric Saubert, that's why he was picked up so quickly from the Dolphins. Mm-hmm. If you're a guy like
Saubert sighting,
yeah, I know
it's back.
Yeah. If you were, and then Krull, I think, is another guy that's going to be in that same mold for my Denver Broncos. And another guy that people forget, who has typically been used as an inline blocker, but in preseason has actually caught the ball very well typically, is Nate Adkins, who is a second-year tight end on the Denver Broncos, who was a college free agent last year in 23. And again, I think Thomas Yasmin can be that guy that will kind of push guys out the way and probably get his way onto the 53-man roster, simply because, as you were saying, Alex, about your Chiefs and just in terms of your scheme, the Broncos run a tremendous amount of 12 and 13 personnel.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And they're going to need to do it, especially this season.
And so when you run with 2 or 3 tight ends on the field at any given time, in various plays and play designs and that sort of thing, you need the depth. You need 4 tight ends on the roster, and they need to be healthy. Dulcich is very similar to Mike Williams from the Chargers. Dulcich and Williams are on the short list of invites for all the medical staff's parties, and
single-handedly giving them jobs.
Yeah, and that's a problem, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's a problem. Knowing the medical staff's kids' names on a first name basis.
On a first name basis.
Yeah, that's a problem. Okay,
Yeah.
like that's just a problem. I'm just gonna say it out loud. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, guys. Let's throw over to the Raiders. Alex, you said you had some of Jack's comments. Do you want to go ahead and bring those
Oh
forward?
yeah, I mean, yeah. Why? Hold on. Well, I know he was talking about. I wrote him down, but here I scrolled to it. So I know he said for his first bubble guy in no particular order is safety Chris Smith,
Yep.
which I don't know anything about, but with given a name like Chris Smith, I think that's pretty par for the course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to look at their depth chart so I could kind of see. Oh,
They
yeah,
took him in last year's draft. It was a 5th round pick.
well, yeah, because they got the guy who's the one from Air Force. Who's the safety from Air Force? Is that Taylor?
Yeah.
Trey Taylor.
Here, so
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Trey Taylor would. There we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Ed
Yeah,
Reed's cousin.
yeah.
So,
Oh wow,
fun fact.
that's kind of cool actually.
But yeah, I've even seen some stuff about Taylor and how he's lighting it up already, and I think sometimes with those academy guys, like there's good, but there's the stigma of, what will they have to go do their service and so I think you see some kind of fall through the cracks when they really could be,
Great
NFL
players.
caliber. Yeah, I mean, this dude, Jack said he won the Norris Trophy. Like that's pretty wild.
Yeah.
For playing at Air Force and like whatever the Mountain West or whatever conference they're in, and you're the best safety in college football.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, I mean, that says something.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Second one, he had corner
Devonshire. Oh, their second draft.
Devonshire. That's a sick name.
Yeah, Faison. Faison
7th
was
round pick though, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Brandon Faison was who's a former Charger cornerback. He was all right. Telesco era guy, so no shocker there that they have him on their roster.
Well, Faison has played or had some seasons that he played very well with the Raiders, actually, where he fit very well into their scheme. But like any player as they age and that were never, elite overall, generally speaking, the question is, can you sustain that level of success? And if you can't, then it is what it is, right? So, so then there's that too. So that makes some sense, right? Which is to say, hey, can this guy beat out a vet? And if they can, or even come close, then you stick with the young guy rather than the vet, because
Oh yeah.
You want that youth on your roster to kind of shine out.
And looking at their depth chart, their starting rotation of corners, I'd say, is pretty set. So it's kind of like you were saying, if you can get someone that's as good or slightly better or right there, and a younger player compared to someone that's been around a few years, like you're gonna go with the young bull.
Yeah.
The young Cav.
Younger, cheaper option.
Well, and you also are playing the odds at that point that the young guy is less likely to get injured as well, and is also then better and more likely to develop for you as well at the same time. And so it's just there's too many wins in the win column to have that young guy not step in, right? So it makes total sense.
So we got the next one here. Nesta J. Silva.
Another sick name.
7th round pick.
Nesta
J.
Silva. Sounds like a Key and Peele player. Nesta J. Silva, Colorado State.
Well, I think that makes sense, right? If you didn't solidify yourself in the 53-man roster right from the get-go at the D tackle spot, which is,
and they added Wilkins to it.
Yeah,
someone's gonna be the odd man out. That was in that crop last year. So
yeah.
And then we got Jordan Meredith, who's on the bubble. I mean, JPJ and Glaze. Well, JPJ and Glaze are are interesting guys. And then, you sign Pete, who can play left tackle and left guard. Yeah, you're correct. And you got Whitehair, who's the guard from the Bears.
Da Bears.
Da Bears. But you also have this. It's going to be very interesting, and I think it'll be more telling once you land on what your scheme is going to be with this new coaching regime. Because obviously there's going to be changes to your scheme from what McFired had. And I think that makes sense, right? Like, you're going to make changes from what he had put in place. Fine, cool. But then the question is, how much change? And if it is enough of a change, will that also then alter what, which players maybe looked great last year for you, but then won't look good this year? Because, I mean, Alex, better than anyone probably on this panel here, and probably in the chat too at this point, which is, if you're a power guy and you're running outside zone, you're done.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like you're not the guy for the scheme, right? And
gonna have a bad time.
Yeah. And so, there's certain things that, like footwork and hand placement and just, the way that your body's composed and the way you've trained, that will just not end well for you given scheme and all that sort of thing, right? And so I think that's a fair comment to make. And
this last one, I feel like we've talked about it before, and I definitely agree with. Just looking at where their running back room's at, and I mean, Laub or Lube, however you say his name.
Slippery
hell of a college prospect, and I think kind of certainly can do what Abdullah brings to the table, and is young, like kind of fits the mold of what we've been talking about, of like the player that's younger, that's just as good, or like, right there,
possibly better,
that could become better through development. And you can't really go to the unknown of another team claiming them, to hope they come back to your practice squad. And I mean, Abdullah's been around, like, he was a hell of a player at Nebraska. I thought he was going to be a beast in the NFL.
He had some solid years over there in Detroit.
Yeah, unfortunately, one year I'm a little salty about him because, like, I took him. I think it was like the first year he was the solidified starter of Detroit, and I'm like, Amir Abdullah. All he needed was a chance. Let me take him in fantasy, and I named my team the Abdullah Oblongatas. Right, like, I'm fully committed to this guy, and he, I think, scored like 40 points that year. It's just absolute trash. But I mean, he's essentially all he is a kick returner. So.
With the new special teams rules, that I was just going to say that too. There's going to be a lot of roster spots this year where players normally wouldn't have them, and they're going to have them solely because of the new kick return rules. Mm-hmm. So I think that's going to be.
You're going to lose depth guys at the safety. Sorry, you're going to lose depth guys at the corner position. You're also going to lose depth guys at some of the safety spots and the inside backer spots. And I think you're going to end up with an increased number of athletic defensive ends that are development guys that might be fringe pass rusher guys that they want to keep on the roster, but they otherwise wouldn't have been able to with the old special teams rules, because they needed speed for the guys to get down the field, but now they don't need that same, dynamic kind of player. Right. And I also think you're going to end up with some developmental tackles and even guys like that are more athletic, and even tight ends that are more athletic, that will end up staying on the roster as a result, because they're bigger guys they have speed, but they're bigger guys that can block and tackle. And you want guys to kind of, stay in the way.
DZ, man.
Yeah, Jack, I understood that Abdullah was the bubble guy.
It's gotta be. We
can work. We can figure this out, DZ. You gotta put some hyphens in there or something.
It's gotta be HAR-E, just capital E.
Just do SUK. That's pretty good. I might have to use that.
Me off guard, man.
Yeah.
I also, but kind of piggybacking off of what you just said, Rich, I think too we'll probably see teams keep an extra, like compared to how rosters have been constructed the past few years, like an extra running back or wide receiver from the mindset of like, you're our return guy on these new kickoffs. Like
Darius Davis, you're
Yeah.
saved. Your roster spot is solidified.
because I feel like, the last, especially as they progress to like, if you fair caught it anywhere behind the 25, you're going to the 25 and all that stuff. You saw teams less and less like prioritize having a solidified special team return man and just were like, oh, we'll throw. I mean, hell, I think the Chiefs used like 8 different guys last year. They're like, it doesn't matter. Like, just if you don't like it, fair catch it. We'll be at the 25. But now, I mean, at least the sense with the change is, it's going to be kind of a more impactful play and not just, part of the script, so to speak.
Yeah,
So
more
I
incentive
think you
to come
see
out with it.
teams make an effort to say like, okay, like we talked about, like Abdullah, like, yeah, he can maybe come in and change a pace every once in a while, but his kick returns, but we're going to keep him for that reason because we don't want to be, starting on the 15 every time or wherever it's at because we have someone that's ineffective at returning the ball.
Yeah, I agree. Just as a quick side note, after the show on X, I'm going to be sharing a link to my stepdaughter's YouTube channel. I could just if you want to check that out. If you have young kids,
What does she do?
She does her own editing and stuff too, which is great. Nice to see someone kind of doing some of their own stuff. But she does a lot of like edited shorts and kind of more trendy stuff. We'll just say things that are not necessarily within my wheelhouse.
Just a
No
couple years,
cap.
right? Only by a couple years, Rich.
Yeah. Just I mean, I'm so close, right?
Just missed it.
Yeah, just missed that. But I'm like, let's just say that I'm. I feel like I'm a closer generation to the old people that are nearly dead and behind my house right now than I actually back onto like an old folks home.
Yeah.
So,
I thought you were gonna say you lived near a funeral
Cemetery.
home or
Yeah.
cemetery.
Behind it, yeah. I'm actually the caretaker of a cemetery.
yeah. So, but anyways, I'm going to be posting her channel on my X account. Just anyone who wants to go ahead and subscribe, it would be great for her to get some additional shares, likes, and subscriptions. We are going to be trying to bring on the rest of the AFC North. I actually just got a message during the show that our Steeler guy has sent his sincere apologies. He's been super busy with work and some stuff, and he's going to try and get on the show to get his insight with the Steelers, which is going to be obviously one of the highlight shows, I think, for us in the AFC North, with all of the interconnection ties and stuff with the AFC West as well. Obviously, Russell Wilson being there, being kind of the biggest, banner there now. Yeah. We will do our best to get the Steelers guy on, Bengals as well as the Ravens.
Why is he scared?
Well, no, he wants to come on. He legitimately apologized. So we will go ahead and get him on the show as quickly as we can, as well as the Ravens and the Bengals. It'll be great to have the complete kind of AFC North on to kind of discuss what it's going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. But ladies and gentlemen, I think that's going to do it for the show today. We had some great discussion, some great comments, and some great banter back and forth. If you have any questions or even players that you think we either got wrong or ones that we think we missed, leave them down below in the comments. For those of you who are joining us both now and after the fact, there are the YouTube channels for the various ones that we are all part of in the description down below. It helps us a lot if you go ahead and like each of the videos on each of the channels and go from there, and we will go from there. Oh, that's so funny.
I'm stealing that DZ for my fantasy name this year.
Trademark it now, DZ. Come on. We can work this out.
So DZ, the other one is bought and sold.
Oh.
Hey, wait. Why we gotta get mean about it? Come on.
Or the Harry Baugh.
Harry Baws.
That's funny.
Harry Baws.
The Harry Baugh.
Suck my Harry Baws.
No, just Harry Baugh, right?
There you
Harry
go,
Baugh.
Yeah.
That'll probably let you do that one. Harry Baws.
Hell
Suck
yeah.
my Harry Baws.
Yeah. So, anyways, guys, I want to thank you very much for joining us live. We have given you several names for your fantasy teams already at the end of the show to our Chargers fan. And we will go from there. Next week will be hopefully a full show with all of us here. And we will get all into the depths of all the different AFC North teams, as well as some additional items of our teams as well. And we will obviously cover and bring you any new news from the AFC West as well. Until next week, where the West side is the best side. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what? This is my lifestyle. Wait a minute.